You've seen the reactions. You've seen the reviews. Geese, one of the hottest bands of 2025, and in 2026, I feel like you might agree with me that they haven't been talked about enough. But we're not here to do any simple reaction or thoughtful review. We're here to dive deeper, because that's what music's about. Mainly because I am bothered as a songwriter by the fact that I don't know if Cameron Winter wants us to understand what the song Husbands is about. And today, on this episode of Lyric Mechanics, we are going to try and dig deep. To analyze this song, we're going to have to read the lyrics. So let's start with that. This song follows an A-B, C-B format. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. I'll repeat what I say, but I'll never explain. So you don't have to waste your time. You don't have to waste your time. Hiking up 100 hills. You don't have to, but I will. Will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die? Will you know what I mean? Will you know what I mean? Yeah, there's a horse on my back, and I may be stomped flat, but my loneliness is gone. All my loneliness is gone. There's a horse on my back, gives me all that I need. Will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die? Will you know what I mean? Will you know what I mean? And if my loneliness should stay, well, some are holiest that way, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. Will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die? Will you know what I mean? And then that repeats, because we'll get into that. First of all, we're going to start just by analyzing the text. Okay, I'll repeat what I say, but I'll never explain. That's rather strong, don't you think? A refusal, if you will. So you don't have to waste your time. Is this song aimed at people like me who spend too much time thinking about what lyrics mean? Because listen, you cannot fool me, okay? There's an intention there. Because everything that humans do is a choice, even if it's subconscious or conscious. So we can extrapolate from that and start to break down these lyrics and try and see what he's getting at. Even if he doesn't have an intended message, that in itself is a message. Hiking up 100 hills. You don't have to, but I will. What hills? Where are we hiking? Now you see, Cameron Winter is a writer that does his best to be as ambiguous as possible, while also saying more than a song that is being specific. And I'll explain. I'll explain. I'll try not to repeat myself. Will it wash your hair clean? What is it? What is the narrator talking about? When your husbands all die. Whose husbands? These are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. Will you know what I mean? Will you know what I mean? Well, you repeated yourself twice, implying that I should. And in your repetition, that there lies the explanation. Yeah, there's a horse on my back. What horse? What? You were hiking and now there's a horse? Dude, get your modes of transportation aligned. And I may be stomped flat, but my loneliness is gone. All my loneliness is gone. Does the horse cure your loneliness? What loneliness? Are you alone? I guess by the implication of when your husbands die, he's inviting the partners of said husbands to join him in isolation and loneliness in a way, right? Because why would he frame it, your husbands all die and my loneliness is gone? I don't know, man. There's a horse on my back, gives me all that I need. Okay, so now the horse is stomping you and giving you all that you need at the same time? What a horse. Will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die? Will you know what I mean? Will you know what I mean? And if my loneliness should stay, well, some are holiest that way. Holiness, religion, of course, is the first connotation that I assume when I hear that word. Falling apart, repeated 4 times. Cameron Winter repeats himself a lot in his writing. Of course, that's nothing new, but it is, you can find a little bit more significance in the repetition, especially when we talk about the meta text later, when he self-references the fact that he repeats what he says, but he'll never explain. Okay, so now that we've done the read through of the text, let's try and think about a narrator. Is there any core figure that's telling the story? I mean, it's from a first person perspective of I'll repeat what I say, but I'll never explain. You don't have to waste your time hiking up 100 hills. You don't have to, but I will. So it's almost like a challenge of like, well, You'll just, I won't explain to you. You won't do all this stuff, but I'll be the one that is taking the courage to hike up these hills and have the fortitude to just state exactly what I mean without having to explain. Isn't that what art is? Art is the meaning. I mean, I think of people like David Lynch in this moment, because when questioned on what his work means, it's just like, go watch the movie. Did you watch the movie at all? That's the meaning of it. You don't have to ask the author of any text what they're trying to say. They're telling you what they're saying. In this way, Cameron Winter is very graceful in talking about the text because he doesn't have to explain, and he's explaining why he doesn't have to explain. So again, we have all these questions about who's the horse, who are the husbands, we have the narrator. Who is the narrator talking to? Are they talking to us? Are they talking directly to the partners of the husbands who are all dying? Or hypothetically, when your husbands die, not if, not would, when. I think part of the strength of Geese and why people find it so timeless is because of the ambiguity and the lack of central perspective. I think a song, when it can achieve such a writing position, can be universally accepted by people, and they can supplant themselves in the narrator's shoes and be able to take their own meaning from the song. We all experience life in different ways, and through a mutual framework that's loose, we can understand more about ourselves and each other. And in these trying times, that is important, to have a sense of support through art. Not what the song's necessarily about. I think we've done enough of reading the text. Let's move on. Let's talk about some of the context behind this song. New York band, youngsters. Perhaps if you read too far into the context, you might be assuming that the narrator is describing a parental-child relationship and could be critiquing a wife or a husband about their husband, or there's the spouse of that husband. That's one way to read it. The beauty of art and lyrics is that there is no one correct way to read a song. The author, even if they have a specified meaning that they will tell people, that is not the only way to interpret art. Is there anything about these modern times that this was written in that maybe would inform the perspective of this song? I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made that because it's such a heavy year, maybe there's themes of loneliness. I think that is pretty universal with the internet and how our society is structured, with a lack of emphasis on community. Maybe, but that's reading pretty far into it. There's a horse on my back. I've seen people say that could be about heroin, which honestly is a pretty fair interpretation of the song. I don't know if that's how I read the song. I think, the horse is more of a metaphorical weight than anything else. The context doesn't necessarily implicate that reading. So if the context doesn't tell us anything, let's look at the paratext, the packaging of this song. I think we have two very important themes that we can look at through the titling of the album, the titling of the song, and the album cover itself. The album is called Getting Killed, and through that, we can link killed with when your husbands all die. Okay, what does that do? How does that union of themes and imagery evoke an emotion in us? That is what we should be asking. I personally, don't know about you guys, fear death and fear getting killed. That is something that is not good, that I do not want in my life. So when your husbands all die, husbands, I think marital union, right? And regardless of how you feel about marriage as an institution or as an idea or philosophy, the intended implication of that word is a bond, right? So if a bond is being broken by death, I would describe that as something undesirable. What happens when we all die? We self-reflect. Typically, we go into grief. We go into mourning. And I think there is a dissolution of meaning in death that forces us to contest with our own mortality. Will it wash your hair clean when your husbands die? If the death of a bond forces you into a new perspective and a new headspace, will you understand Cameron Winter's ambiguity? We have to sit with our grief. We have to look at the unknown and the void and ask ourselves, do I know what any of this means? An angel surrounded by a sky of blue, pointing a gun right at you. When presented with such an image, how do you feel? How do you feel when the authors are directly telling you when your husbands die, when a gun is pointed at you? Will you understand any of this? I resonate with that. Certainly, when I look outside and I see where we are just as people and as a society, I see themes of loneliness. I see themes of weight on people. And part of this is the context. I see a loss of meaning. I see a loss of bonds and a loss of collaboration, a loss of union. And that, I think, is part of the reason why I'm so attracted to this song, because it has so many ways to read it, but the emotion is still there. I mean, it's kind of I don't know, it's got an angst to it. Don't you agree? When your husbands all die, and he sings it in that guttural way. I can't stop singing it, man. There's no rhyme there. It's just simply put, will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die? So with that, we can also move on to looking at the inner text, which in this sense, I don't know if there's really any references to other works. I mean, you could draw a really thin line between songs about heroin in this song because of the horses thing, or songs about loneliness, but I find that the references to other work are the least relevant in this part of the analysis. We could talk about the meta text. Here, we can find even more nuggets of truth within Cameron Winter's writing. I'll repeat what I say, but I'll never explain. And then he repeats himself all over this song, and not only on this song, but all over the record as a whole. And so we have to find meaning because we can connect those two lines with the choices of repetition to try and figure out if that is a statement, which I believe it is. So you don't have to waste your time. He's referring to me. He's referring to you, the audience. If he explains what he means, if Cameron Winter's like, this is my way, this is the right way, that has nothing to do with our perspective. I don't know the guy. What relevancy does his reading on a piece of art have anything to do with the way that I feel about the song or feel about the work? I think that it is pigeonholing the song and the art, and this goes for anything, man. If you have an author that is telling you explicitly what something means, that is a waste of your time, because it closes off the possibilities of different reads of the text and ultimately strips us from meaning, because art should communicate so much more depth than one single explanation of what words mean, because words are fickle and small and ultimately on their own mean nothing. It is how the words are used, and to try and understand all of this together, that is the meaning that we can take from a work of art. And in that, I think we can move back to looking at the original text again. Because if there is a twinge in the brain, a light bulb that goes off of like, oh, wait a minute, this song is referencing itself, that may be indicative of further meaning. When we look at the text, I think we might be able to answer the question, or at least kind of allude to the meaning of, yeah, there's a horse on my back, and I may be stomped flat. So my question in the beginning was, what is this horse? And again, we cannot definitively answer, and that is not my intention, because I don't want to tell you what this song means. That is not the point of doing analysis or critical analysis on any sort of media or any sort of text. It's not for me to tell you what it means. It's for me to talk about the song, to expand its meaning, to not define it as one thing, but to instead embrace the ultimate universe of possibilities and to further our enjoyment of that text or that media. Yeah, there's a horse on my back, and I may be stomped flat. If we think about lyrics and writing and consider the context that Cameron Winter is a songwriter who writes about himself sometimes, we can maybe look into that and say, is the horse songwriting? Is the horse itself loneliness? My goal here is to share a litany of different readings because I think once you can see something from different perspectives, even if none of them are valid, you get to have a clarity that you would not if you were only reading the song in one way. Does songwriting threaten to stomp flat Cameron Winter? This is where my work as a songwriter kind of flares up, and this is why I'm reading it in this way. Songwriting is not a binary good or bad force. Songwriting is a tool, and sometimes it can be really nice and it can cure my loneliness and I can feel like I'm doing something meaningful. And other times it's an absolute horse on my back, a weight that I cannot escape. Writing can be one of the most explosive, energizing experiences that I have ever lived through. I can get my heart racing when I come up with something cool. I can feel the rush and the thrill of creating something out of nothing. That same nothingness can hold me down like a weight. When I stare at a blank canvas or a blank DAW screen, and I just got a guitar in my hand and I'm just noodling and I can't come up with anything, I feel bad about myself. And perhaps other writers that are inclined to this disposition, I feel like they might relate to that. I think it's like any hobby or anything that you put a large percentage of yourself into that is also very personal. When you fail at writing, you can feel like a failure, even though, it's just writing a song, but still that experience can be like a horse on your back. Gives me all that I need. I too feel like songwriting gives me all that I need. And if my loneliness should stay, well, some are holiest that way. Decrying that maybe loneliness is not a plague after all. Maybe it's not something to run from or to avoid. Maybe an embrace of loneliness is okay. Now, the one thing that I don't understand is why Falling Apart is included in this song. Maybe if you do read the song about a discussion of meaning and a discussion of songwriting, you could either read that as, you're falling apart because of the songwriting, or you're falling apart after the loss of meaning, after your husbands all die, which I think is probably the most reasonable read that I have. But that is really ambiguous because it's not referring to anything specific. And with all of that said and done, I'll put my phone to the side. I think we've answered our question, at least a little bit. And for me, I'll be thinking about this song probably for the rest of the week, if not for my whole life, because I do, even though I joked at the beginning saying that, people are tired of hearing about the Geese thing, I don't think that's true, because good art is good art is good art. I guess there's no need to put a value system on that. Art that makes us feel something is art that makes us feel something, which is a very silly sentiment, but in this case, I think that power prevails. I think it's a beautiful record. I really do. I am saying the most controversial thing I possibly could, but when my head is beneath the gallows, as I share my inflammatory statements, you'll know what I mean. My name has been Braelen. My name is Braelen. My name is Braelen, and this has been Lyric Mechanics. Thank you for joining me on an afternoon or an evening, whenever you're watching this, of some lyric analysis and some discussion about some songs. I believe that songs and art deserve a conversation and life to be breathed into them through our discourse, and nothing more, nothing less. And that is my goal. I just want to talk about some cool stuff, because I don't know about you, but I feel like I don't have platforms or avenues to really talk about songs in depth in the way that I feel about them. Most of the times I talk to my friends about art. It's like, hey, did you enjoy this? Yeah, it was awesome. And there's a level of craving that I have for deeper analysis. And this has certainly scratched that itch for me, and I hope it's done the same for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. We're going to talk about some lyrics. All right, take care now.